This story is titled, My Mom Let Her Husband Kick Me Out on My 18th Birthday, but the house they took was secretly mine. My mom let her new husband kick me out on my 18th birthday. But what they didn't know was the house they thought they stole was secretly mine all along, and now I'm taking it back. My name's Kevin, and I'm 19. Right now, I'm studying computer engineering at a state college here in Arizona. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to spill my life story online, but after everything that's gone down these past several months, I figured maybe someone out there could learn from what happened to me. Fair warning, this is going to be a long ride. I grew up in what I'd call a middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix. You know the type, one of those cookie-cutter suburbs where every house looks nearly identical but has just enough differences so you don't accidentally walk into your neighbor's place. Our house had 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a backyard big enough for a game of catch, and a garage that my dad converted into his personal workshop. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Speaking of my dad, he was hands down the best man I ever knew. He worked as an electrical engineer at an aerospace company, coached my little league team, and even showed me how to build my first computer when I was 8. He wasn't perfect, couldn't cook to save his life, and had a weird obsession with 80s metal bands, but he was steady. He was always there, until one day he wasn't. When I was 10, my dad died from a massive heart attack. He was only 38. No warning signs, no family history, he was just gone. One day we were tossing a baseball in the yard, and the next day my mom sat me down and said, "He's not coming home." Losing him shattered me in ways I couldn't even begin to understand as a kid. For about 2 years after that, it was just me and my mom, Sandra. She managed, I guess. She worked as an office manager at a dental clinic, bringing in around $55,000 a year. We weren't rich, but my dad's life insurance and work benefits kept us comfortable enough. The thing is, my mom was never what you'd call warm. Even before Dad died, she wasn't the affectionate type. After his death, it felt like she got colder, as if she resented having to raise me alone. And then Rick showed up. She met him at some local business networking event. He introduced himself as an entrepreneur with multiple businesses and investment opportunities. Red flags were all over the place, but my mom either couldn't or didn't want to see them. 6 months later, she married him. I was 13 at the time. Awkward, shy, and not remotely thrilled about this random guy stepping into my life as my new dad. Rick didn't come alone either. He brought along his 15-year-old daughter, Tessa, and let me tell you, she was a nightmare from day one. Tessa stole my stuff, ate my snacks, left her messes everywhere, and then blamed it on me. She'd use my computer without permission, download sketchy files that crashed it, and laugh about it later. And of course, anytime I tried to stand up for myself, Mom and Rick backed her up. "Kevin, don't be so sensitive. You need to share with your sister. Stop exaggerating." It was like hearing the same broken record on repeat. And every time, Tessa would flash me a smug little smirk, fully aware she could get away with anything. Rick? He was even worse. The guy drove a leased BMW he could barely afford, wore fake designer clothes, and bragged constantly about his big deals that never seemed to go anywhere. He'd strut in with flashy gadgets or watches, show them off for a week, and then poof, they'd vanish once he couldn't keep up the payments. On top of all that, he was lazy as hell. Mom would head out to work at 7:30 every morning, and Rick would still be in bed at noon. He claimed he worked from home, but from what I saw, most of his time was spent watching ESPN and occasionally making calls to rope more poor suckers into his pyramid schemes. By the time I hit 14, it was obvious nobody in that house was going to look out for me. So I decided I'd better start looking out for myself. When I turned 15, I focused on school, kept my head down, and got a part-time job at a local computer repair shop. Mr. Singh, the owner, was one of the kindest people I'd ever met. He taught me real skills, not just how to replace parts, but how to troubleshoot and think critically. I started out making $10 an hour sweeping floors and stocking shelves. But as I learned more, he bumped me up to $12, then $15 for actual repair work. I stashed nearly every penny I earned. I had this old ammo box that used to belong to my grandfather, and I hid it in the crawl space above my closet where Tessa couldn't snoop. By the time I graduated high school, I had saved over $8,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine, earned with my own 2 hands. I also had a small, tight-knit group of friends, Adam, Noah, and Luke. We were your typical nerdy crew, building gaming PCs, hosting weekend D&D sessions, and staying as far away from high school drama as possible. Adam's family was laid back and welcoming. Noah's mom worked nights as a nurse, so his place was often quiet. Luke's parents were strict but fair. They all knew my home life wasn't great, but I tried not to burden them with the details. Then came my 18th birthday, October 22nd of last year. It was a Thursday. That morning, I had my programming fundamentals class at the community college. Senior year was a blur of dual enrollment, high school classes, and shifts at the computer shop. Nothing special was planned for my birthday. My friends had suggested grabbing pizza that weekend to celebrate, but on the day itself, I just wanted to go home and chill. Throughout the day, I got a few "Happy Birthday, Man" texts from the guys, a candy bar from Mr. Singh, and even a birthday card from Mrs. Alvarez, our sweet old neighbor who'd been living next door since before I was born. She'd always been kind to me, especially after Dad died. When I got off the bus at 6:30 that evening, I didn't own a car. Rick had convinced Mom that buying me one would spoil me, but I wasn't too bitter about it. I was in a decent mood, hoping maybe there'd be a cake waiting at home. Maybe Mom remembered. As I approached the house, I saw Rick standing in the driveway beside his precious BMW. He was holding my old blue duffel bag, the one Dad and I used for camping trips, and wearing the smuggest grin imaginable. No hello. No, happy birthday. Nothing. He tossed the bag onto the concrete with a thud and said, "Time's up, kid. You're 18 now, which means you're not my problem anymore. Get the hell out of my house." Kevin, did you know your grandfather owned that house free and clear? And when he passed, he left it specifically to you. I nearly choked on my soda. What are you talking about? That house belongs to Mom, doesn't it? Uncle Thomas shook his head, his expression hard. No, kid. Your grandfather, your dad's dad, bought that house back in the 90s for around $120,000. When his health started failing, he updated his will. He left cash to your dad and me, but the house? He left it to you, his only grandchild. He got up, walked over to his old oak desk, and pulled out a faded folder filled with yellowing papers. Here's a copy of the will. I kept one because, honestly, I never fully trusted your mom, especially after she rushed into marrying the con artist Rick. My hands trembled as I flipped through the legal documents. The words seemed to blur for a second before I spotted the line that made my stomach drop. My primary residence at 1422 Oakwood Drive shall be left to my grandson, Kevin Allen Mitchell. It was there, in black and white. But how? I stammered. If the house was mine, how could they live there? How could they kick me out? Uncle Thomas let out a slow breath, like he'd been expecting this reaction. You were only 11 when your grandpa died. Too young to legally own property. The will stated your parents would act as trustees until you turned 18. When your dad passed a year later, your mom became the sole trustee. She was supposed to transfer the house to you on your 18th birthday. My mind spun as the pieces fell into place. Instead of handing over what was rightfully mine, they'd thrown me out of my own home. Uncle Thomas nodded grimly, like he could see the realization on my face. And that's not all. I bet anything they've been renting out the basement apartment and pocketing the cash, the money that was supposed to go into a trust for you. He wasn't wrong. About 2 years after Rick moved in, they renovated the basement into a separate apartment and rented it out to a college kid named Jake for $900 a month. I had just assumed it was their house and their money. So, what do we do? I asked, my shock quickly boiling into anger. First, we gather everything we can to document this mess, Uncle Thomas said firmly. Then we're going to talk to my buddy Leo. He's the sharpest real estate attorney in the state. Just then, Aunt Rachel appeared with a small chocolate cake and a single candle flickering on top. I know it's a day late, but everyone deserves a birthday cake, she said gently. It was such a simple gesture, but I felt my chest tighten and my throat burn. My own mother hadn't even remembered my birthday, but my aunt, who barely saw me, went out of her way to make me feel like I mattered. As I blew out the candle, Mason asked from across the table, "Did you make a wish?" "Yeah," I said quietly, nodding. "Don't say it out loud," Aunt Rachel teased, "or it won't come true." But deep down, I knew exactly what I'd wished for. Justice. That night, as I lay on the pull-out couch in their converted office, with clean sheets and a roof over my head, everything hit me at once. All the emotions I'd bottled up, shock, betrayal, rage, and grief came pouring out. I buried my face in the pillow so nobody could hear me crying like a little kid. I cried for the house I lost, for my dad who wasn't here to protect me, for the years of enduring Rick and Tessa's cruelty, and for my mom, who chose them over me. By the time I finally cried myself out, I felt hollow. But the next morning, as the smell of pancakes wafted through the house and I heard Mason shooting hoops in the driveway, something shifted. The pain was still there, but now it was mixed with something stronger. Determination. I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to fight back. Over breakfast, Uncle Thomas laid out the plan. I called Leo last night after you went to bed. He's fitting us in at 11 this morning. In the meantime, I want you to jot down anything you can remember about that basement apartment, when they renovated it, how much rent they charged, anything you can think of. I can do better than that, I said, pulling out my phone. I've still got texts from Rick about the rent payments. Uncle Thomas gave a sharp grin. That's my nephew, always thinking ahead. Leo Goldstein's office was in a beautifully restored Victorian downtown. It smelled faintly of leather and old books. His second-floor office had dark wood paneling and shelves crammed with legal tomes. He looked younger than I'd imagined, maybe mid-40s, with a neatly trimmed beard and the kind of glasses that made him look more like a professor than a lawyer. He listened carefully as I told him everything, only pausing now and then to jot something down on a yellow legal pad. Uncle Thomas chimed in with background on my grandfather and the will. When I was done, Leo leaned back in his chair, spinning his pen between his fingers. Well, Kevin, he said at last, this house is unquestionably yours. Your mother had a fiduciary duty to transfer the property to you when you turned 18. Not only did she fail to do that, but she and her husband illegally evicted you from your own property. So, I can just go back and kick them out? I asked hesitantly. Leo gave a thin, almost dangerous smile. We could do that, sure. Or, we could build a much stronger case and make them pay for everything they've done. As he laid out the strategy, my anger hardened into resolve. We were going to prove they'd been collecting rent from Jake and keeping it for themselves. That alone could support charges of misappropriation of funds and breach of fiduciary duty. And because they'd kicked me out at 6:30 p.m. on my birthday, hours before I was technically 18, they might also be in violation of laws protecting minors. Here's the plan, Leo said, leaning forward. First, we establish a paper trail. You mentioned text about the rent. I scrolled through my phone and handed it over. Messages from Rick flashed on the screen. Asterisk, remind Jake rent's due tomorrow. Cash only, $900. Asterisk, Jake's late again. Tell him pay up or he's out. Asterisk, got the $900 from Jake. Gonna put it toward the yacht. Leo raised an eyebrow at that last one. Rick has a boat? Yeah. A little pontoon he bought last summer. Called it an investment opportunity for lake tours. Used it twice, then left it parked in our driveway. Perfect, Leo said, scribbling furiously. Next, we'll get witness statements. Your friend Adam, the tenant Jake, neighbors who might have seen what happened. Anyone. Mrs. Alvarez was outside when Rick threw me out, I remembered. She even called my mom about it, I think. Excellent. Leo nodded. We'll start by filing an emergency petition to secure your ownership and get a restraining order to stop them from selling or renting out the property. Then we'll build the restitution case. Over the next 2 weeks, we gathered evidence and lined up witnesses. Adam and his parents gave sworn statements about how I showed up on their doorstep with nothing but a duffel bag. Luke's dad, a paralegal, helped us navigate the paperwork. And when we reached out to Jake, the basement tenant, he was stunned to learn the house wasn't even legally Rick's or my mom's. Jake looked horrified as he sipped his coffee across from me in a Starbucks near campus. Dude, that's so messed up, he said, shaking his head. I had no idea it was your house. Rick always acted like he was doing me a huge favor by renting to me. Jake handed over copies of his rental agreements and payment records. For more than 3 years, he'd been handing Rick $900 a month, over $32,000 that should have been mine all along. Even worse, he said Rick started demanding cash payments recently. Leo raised an eyebrow as he flipped through the paperwork. He's trying to hide the income, he said flatly. This just keeps getting better for our case. Then there was Mrs. Alvarez, our elderly neighbor, who turned out to be one of the most critical witnesses. She'd seen everything from her porch that night and even snapped photos on her phone. I saw that terrible man toss your bag out like trash, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. I called your mama, but she never picked up. I've been worried sick about you, Mijo. Her photo showed Rick towering over me, my duffel bag on the ground, with a timestamp of 6:30 p.m. on October 22nd. That detail proved I'd still been legally a minor when they threw me out. Then came the kicker. Leo ran a title search on the house and discovered that Rick had taken out a $60,000 home equity line of credit only 6 months after marrying my mom. They had no legal right to do that, Leo said, holding up the documents. This is fraud. They forged papers to get this loan, and the bank never caught it. By mid-November, our case was airtight. Leo filed the necessary motions and sent official notices to my mom and Rick. Judge Bennett, a sharp-eyed woman who didn't seem like she tolerated nonsense, granted us an emergency hearing on the grounds of my wrongful eviction. Now we wait, Leo told me. But not for long. 3 days later, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. My mom's text went from pleading to scolding in a matter of hours. Kevin, please. We need to talk. Followed by, you're destroying this family. I didn't respond. Leo had warned me not to. Then came Rick's turn. You ungrateful little, after everything we've done for you. He spat over voicemail. I blocked his number. And of course, Tessa couldn't resist. She blasted Instagram with a sob story about how her psycho stepbrother was trying to steal her family's home. Most people didn't buy it, but a few gullible followers chimed in. It still stung to see her lies spreading. Finally, the day of our first hearing arrived. I wore a suit Uncle Thomas helped me pick out, my hands trembling as we entered the courtroom. Mom strolled in wearing an outfit I knew she couldn't afford, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Rick was still trying to look smug with his knockoff Rolex, but I watched that smugness evaporate as Leo laid out our evidence. Your Honor, Leo began, his voice calm but commanding. Not only did the defendants fail to transfer the property as required by the will, they unlawfully evicted the rightful owner, who was still a minor at the time, and they've been collecting rental income for years without accounting for those funds. Mom's attorney, a frazzled man with papers spilling out of his briefcase, weakly argued that my mom had used the rental income for Kevin's benefit. Leo didn't miss a beat. We have receipts proving Kevin paid for his own clothes, his own phone bill, and even $300 in rent every month to the defendants, essentially paying them to live in a house he already owned. The judge's eyes narrowed with every new piece of evidence. By the end of the hearing, she issued a temporary order. Mom and Rick were barred from collecting any more rent or making changes to the house. They were also ordered to turn over all financial records within 30 days. Outside the courthouse, Mom tried to intercept me. Kevin, please, we were just trying to prepare you for the real world, she said, her voice cracking. I met her gaze squarely. In the real world, people who steal and lie end up in jail. Consider this your preparation. Rick stepped toward me, fists clenched, but Uncle Thomas moved between us. Not smart, Rick, he said coolly. Rick hesitated, then backed off. Over the next month, the situation snowballed. The financial records revealed the full scope of Mom and Rick's betrayal. They hadn't just taken out one fraudulent loan, they'd taken out two, including a second mortgage for $25,000. That money? Gone. Mostly blown on Rick's online gambling habit. In court, Rick lost his temper, shouting and swearing until Judge Bennett had him escorted out by security for contempt. As Christmas approached, I got a knock on Uncle Thomas's door. It was Jake, the basement tenant. Your mom and Rick told me I have to pay them cash from now on, he said nervously. They said if I talked to anyone, they'd kick me out. We relayed this to Leo immediately. Within 24 hours, Judge Bennett issued a restraining order barring Mom and Rick from stepping foot on the property without court approval. The community started to take notice. Former neighbors reached out with stories of Rick scams. One of Dad's old coworkers emailed me, saying Rick had tried to con him into investing in a fake business opportunity years ago. It was like watching their house of lies collapse in slow motion. Christmas with Uncle Thomas's family felt like a different world. We decorated a real tree, made homemade tamales, and exchanged simple but heartfelt gifts. Aunt Rachel gave me a warm hug and said, "Your family here, Kevin. Always." New Year's Eve, my friends came over for a gaming marathon. As we counted down to midnight, I realized I was truly happy for the first time in years. The final court hearing was set for January 15th. In the weeks leading up to it, Mom tried every trick in the book, tearful voicemails, showing up unannounced at my job, even cornering me outside class. Rick sent his sketchy brother to offer me 10 grand cash to drop the case. I recorded the entire encounter and handed it to Leo. On the morning of the hearing, Aunt Rachel handed me a small box. For after, she said with a smile. Win or lose, we're celebrating you. The courtroom was packed. Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Singh, Jake, and my 3 closest friends all came to support me. When the judge finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of the room. Kevin Mitchell is the rightful owner of the property located at 1422 Oakwood Drive. The defendants failed in their fiduciary duty and committed multiple acts of fraud. Effective immediately, the property is to be transferred to Mr. Mitchell's sole ownership. I let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. She continued, Furthermore, the defendants are ordered to repay $92,000 in misappropriated rental income and loan proceeds. This court is also referring their actions to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges. I glanced at Mom and Rick. Mom looked pale and defeated. Rick was glaring at me like I just ruined his life. Maybe I had. As Uncle Thomas placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, I realized I felt free. Back at their house, Aunt Rachel handed me the box she'd prepared. Inside was a simple keychain engraved with my name and the address of my house. "Your dad would be proud," Uncle Thomas said softly. And for the first time in years, I believed him. That night, as I stood in front of the house I grew up in, the house that was now legally mine, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt peace. This was my fresh start, and I wasn't going to waste it.